in the Loop. I'm Christian Bryant, and this is the empty newsroom where I talk into a camera every day. Personally, it's lonely, but it's better than working from home where access to nap furniture is a little too easy for me. Wildfires don't have to be a natural disaster. We take you out west to show how fires can have a positive impact on forests and actually lead to less danger for people living nearby. Today, we're going to talk a bit about how we are quickly getting older. And no, we're not talking about that creepy reverse Benjamin Button beach. We're focusing on the fastest growing age group in the world, people 65 and older. For the first time in 2018, people over 65 outnumbered children under 5, and it's estimated that by 2050, they'll outnumber 15 to 24-year-olds too. Of course, thanks to modern medicine and science, we're living longer than ever. But this shift in population is also because we are having fewer children. Experts say that's because of sky-high childcare costs and persistent gender inequality. But also, on the brighter side, it's a result of more work opportunities for women too. The aging population is a clear trend in many parts of the world, including the United States. What's still debated is whether this is ultimately a positive or a negative thing, which entirely depends on what metric you're looking at. One of the often overlooked metrics is how this might affect housing in the United States. Skyrocketing demand for new retirement communities have led to fast-growing neighborhoods seemingly changing overnight. That could have huge implications, from redrawing congressional district lines to having big impacts on the surrounding environment. Like the Villages in Central Florida, which was the fastest growing metro area in the entire US over the last decade. But as the backdrop to all that development, Florida is one of the most vulnerable coastal states in the US when it comes to impacts from climate change. Newsy correspondent Bianca Fascini has been covering housing throughout this pandemic from all around the country. Today, she takes us to Central Florida to see how the housing demands for our aging population fit into the story as a part of Newsy's series, Our New Reality, A Changing Planet.
America is getting older, so much so that the fastest growing metro area of the past decade is a 55-plus community.
The house can sell literally overnight.
This is The Villages, located in Central Florida and still expanding beyond its 135,000 residents. What's it like to live here?
Free golf for life if you're a resident here. Where do you get that in Florida? Where do you get that in Texas? Where do you get that anywhere?
But it's not just golf or any of the other endless amenities. It's also the flexible price range for brand new houses, especially in today's market.
It's like $250,000 to upwards of $1 million, so there's really a niche market for whatever you're looking for if you're coming to the Villages.
How many on average, like in a month, how many houses do you sell?
Just in my pipeline, like 4 to 5 home sales a month in the Villages.
The growth points to a significant shift in political power, underscored by Florida gaining an additional seat in Congress this year. It also poses an urgent question whether Florida can balance the demand for retirement communities with protecting the environment. The number of Americans 65 and older is projected to double over the next 40 years, putting all eyes on the retiree-friendly South. One expert says preserving land instead of building on it is crucial in the fight against climate change.
One of the best ways of reducing a carbon footprint is to maintain natural land. Natural land absorbs carbon in a way that developed land never could.
The Villages will start developing another 241 empty acres later this year. To Owens, the potential cost of climate damage outweighs the economic benefits developers bring in through new residents and business, especially as hurricanes are expected to get worse.
If you maintain enough natural land to absorb water, you're much less likely to end up with flooding.
He says the better way forward is compact development rather than sprawl. The Villages did not respond to requests for comment. One longtime Sumter County resident tells Newsy he's conflicted about the growth.
The Villages has made it a lot easier for us to make a living, to provide for our families, but it's also taken away a way of life that we were all used to.
Brown was hired to clear construction sites at the Villages. He says he's grateful for the work, but can no longer recognize his hometown and recently put his house on the market. And that's not the only thing that's left longtime residents unsettled. The county raised property taxes by 25% to fund infrastructure needed for the expansion in 2019. The village's growth demonstrates the challenge of the future. Americans are living longer, and they'll need a place to stay. The question is how to keep pace with demand without sacrificing the environment. Bianca Fascini, Newsy, The Villages, Florida.
Many thanks to Bianca for that reporting. For the next 2 weeks, Newsy will be bringing you stories which highlight what all is happening with our planet through a series called Our New Reality, A Changing Planet. You can catch some of those stories here on In the Loop and on Newsy Tonight. After the break, we're taking a quick trip around the world as we bring you the top trending stories of today. Stick around.
It's time to see the bigger picture, widen the lens, narrow the divide.
We must love and support one another!
That support is shifting, and it's shifting toward concern for climate.
It's about the whole community stepping up to help.
Not everything is left or right, good or bad.
The human capacity for change is so inspiring.
It's time to look closer at the whole story.
A hurricane don't care what your color is or how much money you make. It affects us all.
It's time to ask, why?
The whole goal is to point people to something bigger.
Introducing a new point of view. Yours. Newsy. Watch free 24/7.
Welcome back, gang. Tonight's trending topics are brought to you by... I'm messing. This segment ain't got no sponsors. Although I wouldn't mind having a beverage company make sure my mug runneth over. With coffee, obviously. Here's what's trending on social. If you thought being dragged to Epcot was bad, listen to this. Tens of thousands of visitors at Shanghai's Disneyland were stuck in the park Sunday after one person who visited a day earlier tested positive for COVID-19. According to the Associated Press, nearly 34,000 people were stuck in the park for hours. But by Monday, all of them had tested negative for COVID-19. The Disneyland lockdown represents China's strict zero COVID measures for managing infections within the country. While more than 75% of the population has been fully vaccinated, the country's borders remain closed, all international arrivals must quarantine, and they are quick to lock down millions of people if need be to stem an outbreak. China is one of few countries in the Asia Pacific that hasn't let up on COVID restrictions, and it seems to be working. For comparison, Reuters COVID tracker puts the US daily average of COVID infections at nearly 73,000. Mainland China, 67. Twitter is such a weird and hellish and unexpected place where every once in a while, you'll see an exchange that really raises an eyebrow. Like Elon Musk wagering his Tesla stock if David Beasley, the director of the UN's World Food Program, can lay out in tweet form how $6 billion will solve world hunger. Now, that number didn't just come out of thin air. Reporting from CNN quoted Beasley saying $6 billion to help 42 million people that are literally going to die if we don't reach them. He called out Musk and Jeff Bezos to basically make it happen. This weird game of chicken to solve world hunger kind of sullies the actual issue that, according to the World Food Program, more than 40 million people are on the brink of famine. And climate change and the COVID-19 pandemic has made things even worse. For what it's worth, Beasley said he'd be willing to meet with Musk and show him how $6 billion can help millions of people. And for his part, Musk hasn't rescinded his offer. Yes, there is such a thing as playing Christmas music too early. And a Texas bar drew the line, banning patrons from playing Mariah Carey's iconic All I Want for Christmas Is You before December 1st. The bar's general manager told CNN that she didn't hate Carey or Christmas, but that people played the song too much and it bothered the staff. You might be able to sympathize if you've ever been stuck at an establishment where folks have hijacked the jukebox. I love EWF's September, but I've learned that about 19-20 times is my limit. As for Carey, she's ready for battle. She posted a video of herself smashing a pumpkin with a candy cane baseball bat to say that it's time to start playing her song. And a lot of people agree. The song is already in Apple Music's top 100 and Spotify's top 50 in the US. In the last year or so, there's been growing hype around gut health. It's not as frequent as keto talk once was, but it might be getting pretty close. According to several studies, understanding what's going on in here can help improve things like your immune system and even mental health. So how can you find out what your gut microbiome is made of? Of course, we live in the age of at-home tests, and a quick Google search shows you there's tons of options. But is that really the best way to understand your gut? Our partners at the Washington Post video team break down a ton of topics. Their food and mental health reporter, Mary Beth Albright, takes some gut health tests to go so you don't have to.
Several companies now offer at-home gut microbiome testing and a report about which good and bad bacteria live inside of your digestive system. Some companies also offer personalized supplements or specific diet plans based on your personal gut microbiome. But how does at-home gut microbiome testing work? And can you really make health decisions based on the report you get back? To start the process, I bought a testing kit online. There are many companies that offer this testing for about $100 to $400. And the companies all have different methods of testing your sample. The kit arrived in a few days. First, you register your kit. To do this, you have to agree to the company's specific privacy policy. I decided not to use the kit from the first company I ordered from based on its privacy policy. The kit was a couple $100 less expensive than other kits, but I found their privacy policy was, well, not very private. Also, they sent me a tape measure to register my body measurements, which is not a scientifically necessary part of testing a gut microbiome. Then came the test. Currently, the only way to check what's in your microbiome is to test what microbes come out of your gut, if you know what I mean. Several weeks later, you receive a report about which bacteria the company could detect in your microbiome and their recommendations on how to improve it. This report is about your gut microbiome at the moment of testing. Your gut microbiome changes slightly every day because of the food you eat. But the experts I spoke with said that testing your microbiome should be done in the spirit of discovery. There are tons of limitations on what we can do with the information. Not looking for a pill that if you take it, everything will be better, or a food that if you eliminate it from your diet, everything will be fine. And remember, dietary supplements are not reviewed and approved by the FDA based on their safety and effectiveness. But researchers do have enough information to give general recommendations on gut microbiome health to everyone, whether you have yours tested or not. The best food for your microbiome is a diverse plant-based diet. A study from the American Gut Project showed that people who ate 30 different plants each week have more diverse gut microbiomes than those who eat 10 or fewer plants per week. Eat lots of fiber, which feeds the good microbes in your gut and helps them thrive. Eat fermented foods like kefir, sauerkraut, or kimchi. Limit sugar and processed foods, which can adversely affect your microbiome. There are a lot of factors that affect your microbiome: sleep, exercise, stress, antibiotics, and where you live, for example. There is no one perfect gut microbiome, and everyone's is unique, like a fingerprint. But food is the fastest way to improve your microbiome. So how many calories you pull from your food, your body's ability to use vitamins, your blood sugar levels, all of these are affected by your microbes. And the food you eat today influences the kind of gut microbes you have tomorrow. If you eat fermented foods today, you will likely have greater amounts of beneficial bacteria tomorrow. And those good bacteria work with other good bacteria to produce even better effects. So no need to have a test done to support your microbiome. Just look at what you do 3 times every day.
Many thanks to the folks at the Washington Post. After a quick break, we'll be exploring the NFL's issues with concussions and how scientists are trying to develop a safer football helmet.
What do you think the future looks like?
From Newsy, renowned journalists and filmmakers, comes a celebration of storytelling.
Are we in a killer robots arms race right now?
When the suspect admits to it,
I'm not going to argue the law with you.
New features every week. Newsy Docs presents Sunday nights at 9/8 Central, only on Newsy.
We're reaching the halfway point of this football season, and the NFL is still working to make the game safer. Concussions have become all too common in the sport. NFL injury data shows that in 2020, the league saw nearly 200 concussions, the most frequent injury reported. National correspondent Dan Grossman explains the impact these injuries can have and what can be done to reduce them.
The NFL is storming right now.
The force experienced from a single average NFL collision is comparable to a 30-mile-per-hour head-on car crash. In the most extreme cases, an NFL collision is comparable to a severe crash that is only survivable with a seatbelt.
I was in training camp with the Broncos in the summer of '83, and I remember we were doing a drill called Oklahoma drill, and I tackled a player. And I remember seeing blue dots, and my nose was burning, my eyes were watering.
They are impacts Rick Perea experienced, normalized for 2 years in the NFL before he took a step back and reconsidered everything.
I would look over across the locker room, and I would see guys that are in their 8th, 9th, 10th year that were slurring their words. And I remember thinking to myself, this is what I do for a living, And I just really started to hit me then that this was kind of a primitive way to earn a living.
This was in the 80s, before the current reckoning that has taken place in the NFL over concussions and other head traumas.
Set, fire.
Before people like Lillian Chatham.
It is supposed to simulate your actual neck.
Started working on new technologies to change it.
We created a prototype that is performing better than the top performing NFL helmets that are currently being used. So we have found that the combination of our LCEs in a lattice construct inside the football helmet can reduce the impacts significantly.
LCE stands for liquid crystal elastomer, a malleable substance Lillian's lab Impressio has found shifts upon impact to absorb energy. Current helmets use polyurethane or nitrile foam to absorb energy. They help, but the NFL estimates Impressio's LCEs are 13% more effective at doing the same job.
You're just holding in your hand, you're like, this feels really nice and soft. Yeah. But as soon as you impact it, so at a higher speed, it's actually going to stiffen up, and then that's what it's doing. That's when it's absorbing that energy.
Through something called the NFL Helmet Challenge, Impressio and 2 other companies recently received $1.5 million in funding from the NFL to fine-tune their inventions so they can be used in next-generation helmets. The hope is to reduce head injuries and their impacts in players that have helped propel a considerable drop in interest across all levels of football since 2009.
Honestly, it breaks my heart. It really does. I have close personal friends that are affected by this. As recently as a few weeks ago, I took one of my former teammates with the Broncos to my son's high school football game. And he looked at me at halftime and he says, "Can we go?"
After his experience, Rick worked to get a PhD in performance psychology. Through his practice, he supports active and retired players who have experienced similar head traumas.
I'm going to go ahead and pressurize it.
Along with teams like Lillian's, he hopes to provide an impact to a sport all too familiar with them.
This storm is necessary for the NFL to grow, to understand how these collisions are impacting the brain.
For Newsy, I'm Dan Grossman.
When we're back, we're bringing you part 2 of the wildfire series we brought you last week.
It's time to see the bigger picture, widen the lens, narrow the divide.
We must love and support one another!
That support is shifting, and it's shifting toward concern for climate.
It's about the whole community stepping up to help.
Not everything is left or right, good or bad.
The human capacity for change is so inspiring.
It's time to look closer at the whole story.
A hurricane don't care what your color is or how much money you make. It affects us all.
It's time to ask, why?
The whole goal is to point people to something bigger.
Introducing a new point of view. Yours. Newsy. Watch free 24/7.
Here at ITL, we've been playing with fire, in a sense. Over the past few years, we've reported on record-breaking wildfires around the world, and while climate change is undoubtedly a factor, last week, we took a look at one of the other reasons they can get so out of control.
A century of fire suppression has so altered the natural balance of these forests that their survival is at stake.
Look at that, look at that. We're basically packing the landscape with trees, and there's no doubt about it, things are laid here for much more violent fire behavior than there.
Now, Newsy's Sam Eaton is here to present the last installment of his two-part series. Tonight, he shows us how fire doesn't always need to be a bad or scary thing. In fact, in some cases, it can actually help control future flames.
The numbers start to lose their meaning. This past summer, wildfires burned 6.5 million acres, incinerating entire forests. Southern Oregon's bootleg fire tore through nearly 500,000 acres with such intensity it created its own weather. For most of the forest that burned in these high-severity fires, this is what it looks like today. But something different happened when the fire reached the Nature Conservancy's 30,000-acre Sycan Marsh Preserve. It dropped to the forest floor, and the bigger trees survived. Steve Rondeau is the Natural Resources Director for the Klamath Tribes, a Nature Conservancy partner in managing the preserve.
And so the difference here between both sides of the road, this side got prescribed fire and this side didn't. And it is green on one side, black on the other.
That line between life on one side and death on the other validates the tree thinning and prescribed burning the Nature Conservancy has been doing here since 2005. The goal is to restore the forest's natural ability to survive fire, and it worked.
This map actually shows how the fire came from the south and burned into these treatment areas, and it changed the behavior of the fire.
More and more scientists and forest managers are embracing this approach as a way to save not only these forests from catastrophic fire and climate change, but also the countless homes and communities located right in the middle of them. 400 miles to the north in the forested hills above Roslyn, Washington, the work that protected the Sycan Marsh Preserve in Oregon is just beginning.
After more than a century of fire suppression in these western dryland forests, they're in an ecological crisis, which makes efforts like this to restore these forests all the more critical.
Today, the sound of chainsaws and machinery fill these forests. But instead of the clear cuts that once decimated them, the logging, guided by forest ecologists, is designed to heal.
Yeah, so we're looking at a restoration logging. He just felled the trees, and now he's taking his log loader and he's moving them over to be processed.
The Nature Conservancy's Washington State Forest Manager, Kyle Smith, says the restoration work mimics the naturally fire-tolerant state these forests existed in for thousands of years, with Native Americans setting fire to the landscape to promote hunting and wild foods.
The forest densities were a lot less than what we have today. Those periodic fires came through on 20-year cycles, and they'd burn a lot of those small trees up. So what we'd be left with is those fire-tolerant trees, the bigger Douglas fir and the bigger ponderosa pine that have the thick bark to withstand those smaller fires. And then a lot of these smaller shrubs and trees would get burned up.
Smith says the tree thinning is only the first step. Fall in Roslyn means burning season.
So today we're going to head up to the top of the Clay Elm Ridge above Roslyn, where we've got a approximately 40-acre burn unit prepped.
Chris Martin is the Roslyn Fire Department's emergency management coordinator. These volunteer firefighters and the Nature Conservancy are heading back up to the tree thinning site to intentionally set a fire. After a safety briefing, the firefighters go to work using drip torches to coax lines of fire down the mountain. Nature Conservancy fire ecologist Reese Lawley is part of the team guiding the burn.
And what the prescribed fire does is it reduces the type of fuel of stumps, down logs, and shrubs in a way that when we're in midsummer in August, very extreme conditions, warm, windy, dry, that it's easier to stop that fire from spreading when we don't want it to spread.
Those uncontrolled summer wildfires are something Chris Martin knows well. He says in 2017, the Jolly Mountain Fire, which exploded into a 37,000-acre megafire, came within just a few miles of Roslyn.
And a number of us went and stood up on that ridge and looked out at a 17-mile wall of fire coming towards town and thought, well, how do you stop that?
Fortunately, the fire shifted course at the last minute, but that wasn't until after the incident commander told the crew that large portions of Roslyn were indefensible.
That's when the moment changed, right? I mean, like we, in technical terms, called it a change of underwear moment, where it's like time to really get boots on the ground and address these issues.
You ready for school, honey?
Okay. Laura Oshadas, a volunteer firefighter and county commissioner, says during the fire she went door to door telling people they had to evacuate. At the time, her son was 7 years old.
I went to my son's room because I was taking him to my parents' house so that he wasn't in the midst of all the chaos. And lo and behold, I had noticed his backpack was packed.
But instead of packing clothes, he'd filled his backpack with photographs and his favorite stuffed animals.
Really all the treasures that a young boy has because he was scared. And that really hit home, and I've never forgotten that, because as a mother, you want to protect your children and you don't want them to have that kind of fear. Don't forget your mask. Have a good day at school, okay? You got your bag?
Oshada says that fire back in 2017 changed this town and the way it thinks about fire forever.
We know that we're at risk, and we know we need to do things to help protect us from that.
Back on the fire line, Reese Lawley says support from the community is critical.
So some people wonder how we're going to get to scale in doing 40 acres at a time. But really what we're doing here today, while we are accomplishing 40 acres of good fire, we are also bringing people together, fire chiefs and local people who have been told their whole life that fire is scary, that fire is bad, and that we need to put it out.
He says the scale of what's needed to make a difference is enormous. An estimated 80 million acres in the national forests, and in Washington state forests, nearly 3 million acres. But with recently passed state legislation funding restoration and prescribed burning on more than 1 million acres of Washington's highest risk forests and watersheds, the momentum and political support for bringing good fire back is building. In Oregon, Steve Rondeau with the Klamath Tribe says it's about time.
We've suppressed fires for more than 100 years, and that's what's having a major effect on megafires. And there is something we can do about it. We can look to the past and learn lessons and take from how they were managed at that time and apply it to present day and current society so that we create a better balance.
Rondeau says the Klamath Tribes have a saying, heal the land, heal the people. Because in the end, he says, it's the land that takes care of the people. Sam Eaton, Newsy, Roslyn, Washington.
Here to talk with us more about that story is Newsy national correspondent Sam Eaton. Sam, you talked in your series about just how big these forests in the West are and how much that landscape needs this kind of treatment. I'm curious to know, is it even possible to do this work at the scale that's needed to make a difference?
Yeah, I mean, this is probably the most tricky part about this kind of work, Christian. I think, one of the first things you can do is to do what this past story talked about, is showing how this works, that reintroducing fire into these landscapes isn't this big, scary, unpredictable thing. It's something that works. It restores these forests to their fire-adapted ecology that they've been adapted to over tens of thousands of years, essentially. So one of the trickiest parts of this, bringing this to scale, is the political side of it, right? So here in Washington, where I did much of this reporting, there's been a lot of support on both sides of the aisle, and they actually passed this landmark legislation that's going to fund this kind of work to the tune of $500 million over the next 20 years. You go into Washington, D.C., and I think there's a lot more of a hesitation to bring fire back into these landscapes, which are increasingly populated by humans as well, right? People are building their cabins in the woods. Fire is unpredictable. If you're the one kind of giving the green light to this and somebody's house burns down, that's not something that politically you're going to want to have on your back, right? So, what it boils down to, though, is doing nothing and just letting this cycle burn through is going to be losing a lot of these landscapes that we've come to cherish, these forests that are such a big part of the West here. And so, this is something that we can start doing something about and need to.
In watching this piece, it's such a fascinating dynamic, bringing fire back to these forests. And it's even more interesting to know that there's an environmental group that wants to bring the fires back. What sort of feedback or what sort of reactions are coming out of the, environmental community for something like this?
Yeah, surprisingly, there's a lot of support for this, right? The Nature Conservancy actually has been using fire for decades in the landscapes that they manage, seeing it as a vital part of these ecosystems and vital to the wildlife and just the functioning of these ecosystems that were adapted to have these 5 to 20 year fire cycles come through and kind of rejuvenate the landscape. But there are a lot of environmental groups that are against this, who still see nature and wilderness as this thing that's separate from humans, right? It's this place that you cordon off and let it do its own thing. Historically removing the Native Americans from these landscapes after they've managed them for thousands of years, tens of thousands of years. Fortunately, the science has caught up to this, and a lot of the work that that I was looking at in the story of the prescribed burns, the thinning, is basically going back to that traditional indigenous knowledge and replicating that and bringing it up to the present day, so that this work can be done. This is knowledge that was developed over thousands of years on how you can kind of coax and bring fire into these managed landscapes. Another thing that's really interesting is the environmental groups will seize on climate change as being the main factor here, which it is, but you can't separate that from the fact that these forests, because of fire suppression, have grown in over 100 years to the point where they just can't withstand these fires. And where climate change is something that is pretty much baked into the system and is causing these hotter fires, going in and restoring and bringing fire back to these ecosystems is something that we can do now, and it's something that is within the realm of these communities and these Western states to tackle.
Newsy national correspondent Sam Eaton covering all things fire in this, as I learned through you, in this pyro scene. Sam, thanks so much for your knowledge, your information. We hope to have you back again sometime soon.
Thanks, Christian.
At this point, Sam is our resident fire expert. If you missed his first piece, you can head to the Newsy app and watch it on demand. After the break, we're switching gears and diving into the medical world, from the latest on Moderna's COVID-19 vaccines to hospitals building standards.
Sunday nights, Newsy takes you to the edge. Exploring untold stories.
It's literally an existential threat.
Going far beyond the headlines.
Today, social media is the real world.
Hey, grandkids.
There needs to be a bridging of the gap.
In real life, a next generation news magazine. New episodes, Sunday nights at 8:30, 7:30 Central, only on Newsy.
Welcome back, gang. The FDA says they need more time to approve Moderna's vaccine for teens. They said in a statement they need to look at the rare side effects before allowing kids ages 12 to 17 to take it. While they didn't say how long that would take, they did say it's not something that'll likely be completed before January. National correspondent Thomas Hopaw gives us the most up-to-date information on this approval process.
The U.S. Food and Drug Administration will need more time to give emergency use authorization for the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine for children between the ages of 12 and 17. The reason is because of reports of a rare side effect that causes inflammation in the heart muscle.
The myocarditis, that kind of rare side effect that we've seen with the mRNA vaccine specifically, and whether or not there's increasing concerns about the rate of myocarditis in younger recipients of the vaccine.
The FDA is reviewing recent international analysis about the side effect, according to Moderna. However, the company estimated that more than 1.5 million adolescents received the vaccine in trials, and there didn't appear to be an increased risk of myocarditis in those younger than 18. According to pediatrician Dr. Josh Williams, the difference between Pfizer being approved for these teens and Moderna is that international analysis.
For parents who are still wanting to protect their children against the coronavirus, getting a Pfizer vaccine at this point in time is certainly a great option. We know that the risks of myocarditis from the vaccine, yes, they're real and they exist, but we have to remember that over 5,000 children have already suffered from multi-inflammatory syndrome, right? This very serious kind of immune system dysregulation that accompanies COVID infection, and 650 kids have died, right? And so while the risk of myocarditis is real, it's also very low and generally very mild in children, limited to the first few days and a little bit more common after the second vaccine.
Infectious disease expert and researcher Dr. Thomas Moore says that this delay in teens getting the Moderna vaccine could actually help combat vaccine hesitancy.
To be honest, the risk of having inflammation of the heart or any other side effect from the vaccine is exceptionally rare compared with the risk of death and long-term side effects of the disease itself. Nevertheless, convincing people that is the case is going to require some extra effort, and that's where I presume that the FDA is going to take their time. And really, the main thing is to be as transparent and reassuring as possible.
According to a statement released by Moderna, the FDA notified the company that this review for kids 12 to 17 may not be completed until January 2022. I'm Thomas Hoppo reporting.
Whether you were getting a vaccine or a COVID test, a lot of us probably had more encounters with healthcare professionals recently than in previous years. Hospitals across the country are currently working to prepare for the unknown, including natural disasters, mass casualties, and, well, pandemics. National correspondent Amanda Brandeis explains how hospitals are using lessons from the past to build facilities that are safer, stronger, and ready for anything.
You're not sure what the conditions are going to be 5 years, 10 years. No one would have expected COVID was going to hit us.
On our darkest days, hospitals are among the places we rely on.
When you design a hospital, you've got to be able to design it for 50 or 60 years.
Eric Schilt spent the last decade designing this one, less than a mile from an active fault line.
What's hard about healthcare, in my opinion, is you don't have to be experts at just healthcare. You have to be experts at a lot more of that.
Like earthquakes.
The shock's magnified enormously here. Gas mains are exploding.
As video from this documentary on the California earthquake of 1971 shows.
Olive View, a brand new $40 million hospital dedicated just 6 months ago.
Today's standards rooted in lessons learned over decades.
It is an incredibly dense building.
Made with 27,000 tons of steel, it's the heaviest building per square foot in North America.
A lot of large hospitals have employed this sort of technology. This is the latest.
The next line of defense is underground. 126 base isolation devices to absorb shock and minimize shaking.
We also have these really large shock absorbers. These are viscous dampening devices. So if the building does start moving, these things make sure that it returns.
The seismic devices playing a role beyond structure resilience.
For the thousands of people that would be in a building during a seismic event, they are going to not have that same level of kind of psychological trauma by experiencing such intense shaking.
And it's designed to be fully functional after powerful earthquakes.
Sustainable for up to 72 hours without any outside electricity, any outside water, any outside utilities.
After Hurricane Katrina, hospitals had to design new structures able to withstand failing levees. Tampa Bay, Florida's Level 1 Trauma Center is also planning decades ahead, bracing for floods and expanding to support the growing population. This year, hospitals in Texas face power, water, and food supply disruptions during an unprecedented stretch of below freezing temperatures.
It's impossible to predict, but you try to design flexibility, and that's the shape of the building. It's thinking about infrastructure for the future.
The adult and children emergency departments are now under one roof.
When the unexpected happens, like a mass casualty event or a global pandemic, one emergency department can provide extra space for the one next door.
After COVID, new hospitals will likely account for patient surges.
You also don't want to just build a bunch of empty beds. That is a significant problem in it of its own. So how do you adapt? Flexibility is the key.
The best line of defense when building for the future.
Something that you know is going to be there for the next 50, 60, maybe even 70 years.
In Loma Linda, California, I'm Amanda Brandeis reporting.
Folks, now is the perfect time to get at me on social media. If you like what you're seeing, or even if you can't stand my face for another few minutes, use the hashtag NewsyInTheLoop and let us know. We're closing the loop when you're back. Before we say goodbye, let's take one more look at our top stories for today, just for old time's sake, right? For the first time in 2018, people over 65 outnumbered children under 5, and it's estimated that by 2050, they'll outnumber 15 to 24-year-olds too. Of course, thanks to modern medicine and science, we're living longer than ever. But this shift in population is also because we are having fewer children. Experts say that's because of sky-high childcare costs and persistent gender inequality. The aging population is a clear trend in many parts of the world, including the United States. What's still debated is whether this is ultimately a positive or a negative thing, which entirely depends on what metric you're looking at. One of the often overlooked metrics is how this might affect housing in the United States. Skyrocketing demand for new retirement communities have led to fast-growing neighborhoods seemingly changing overnight.
The Village's growth demonstrates the challenge of the future. Americans are living longer, and they'll need a place to stay. The question is how to keep pace with demand without sacrificing the environment.
Then we learned how fire doesn't always need to be something scary. Sam Eaton has that recap.
So the difference here between both sides of the road, this side got prescribed fire and this side didn't. And it is green on one side, black on the other.
That line between life on one side and death on the other validates the tree thinning and prescribed burning the Nature Conservancy has been doing here since 2005. The goal is to restore the forest's natural ability to survive fire, and it worked.
This map actually shows how the fire came from the south and burned into these treatment areas, and it changed the behavior of the fire.
The Nature Conservancy's Washington State Forest Manager, Kyle Smith, says the restoration work mimics the naturally fire-tolerant state these forests existed in for thousands of years, with Native Americans setting fire to the landscape to promote hunting and wild foods.
The forest densities were a lot less than what we have today. Those periodic fires came through on 20-year cycles, and they'd burn a lot of those small trees up. So what we'd be left with is those fire-tolerant trees, the bigger Douglas fir and the bigger ponderosa pine that have the thick bark to withstand those smaller fires.
More and more scientists and forest managers are embracing this approach as a way to save not only these forests from catastrophic fire and climate change, but also the countless homes and communities located right in the middle of them.
That's it for this episode of In the Loop, but you know the drill. We've got new episodes for you every night right here on Newsy starting at 9 p.m. Eastern. We've got more good stuff coming your way on Newsy in just a moment.